All right, back where I started, I'll walk down and show the edge of the lake, what it's looking like there. So I booked my flight for the day after I turned 18 to London, with a return flight almost 4 months later in August. And so I arrived in London in May. I had a Eurail pass. So a Eurail pass is a train pass for Europe. It was good for 2 months. Probably that was as much as I could afford, and then I planned to hitchhike the rest. And so I arrived in London, and the plan was to hitchhike around the British Isles, UK and Ireland, for the first month, and then start my train pass for 2 months, and then I would have a few more weeks, like 3 more weeks at the end, in which I would be stuck hitchhiking again, because you can't extend that. It's just you can use the train as much as you want in that 2 months, and then that's it. So I started my adventure from London, hitchhiking down to Cornwall, and then I decided as a mission for me, I would hitchhike the entire length of the United Kingdom from Cornwall in the southwest corner of England to John O'Groats, the northernmost point of Scotland, which if you drove it, it wouldn't really take all that long. I'm not sure, but I don't know, maybe it'd be like 10 hours drive or something like that. I'll show on a map. But I took a roundabout route. I was hitchhiking. I went through Wales. I went to the Lake District and eventually made my way up to John O'Groats in Scotland. And then coming down from there, I could tell all kinds of travel stories about those various adventures. But one is that I started hitchhiking back down, planning to head for Ireland. The northwestern corner of Scotland is very remote, just little towns, not many people or traffic or anything. And so you can see, normally the edge of the lake would be like up there by those little picnic tables. And so I started hitchhiking south, and one of my first rides was a lorry driver. Lorries are the trucks, trucks carrying goods in England, but not a big like semi, but a smaller, it was a furniture truck. He was a furniture delivery guy. He was going to some major city of Scotland, but he had deliveries along the way. And so I drove with him, and he basically gave me this amazing tour of I guess that would be the Scottish Highlands, not sure, but through the countryside, areas where if I had gotten dropped off somewhere in there, it could have taken a long time to get out. And so it was this amazing ride all day, and then he dropped me off at a city somewhere, and I forget exactly where I slept that night. I was mostly camping. I had a tent and staying in hostels with the occasional cheap room if I could find one. So a real budget trip. My total budget for almost 4 months was $1,300, which works out to I think $10 per day for Europe. This was 32 years ago. Hostels were in the UK, £3. And then I camped for free at a lot of places. I remember trying to find a hostel in some city in England, and they were all full up, before the internet. You would just go around and go to the front desk of the hostel. If they didn't have anything, well, then you go to the next one. And I was having no luck, and so I just walked out of town, kept walking, found a park, camped there for the night in my tent, and then woke up in the morning, and a bobby, which is the British police officers, was on a horse. I heard the horse snorting. I look out my tent, maybe he said something as well, and he was basically moving me on. He was very friendly, but he was like, yeah, you aren't supposed to camp here. So I got going for the day from there. Anyways, all kinds of stories from there, which are included in my book, Following My Thumb, A Decade of Unabashed Wanderlust. Link is down below the video here. And then I came back from that trip, and I had $0, but I had applied to a university, the University of Alaska Fairbanks, back in the fall. It was the only university that I'd applied to. I just randomly come across it in a book, a catalog of all of the main universities in the United States. Alaska, of course, was at the beginning, I came across that and was like, there's a university in Alaska? Like, I hadn't even really thought that would, exist there. Knew nothing about it. But I just loved the idea, applied for it, forgot about that, came back from my trip from Europe at the end of August, had no plans, no money. And then I was talking with my dad back in Oakland, and he said, well, you applied to that university, right? And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I wonder if I was accepted. He called them. Yes, I was accepted. And he basically offered to, cover things. I would need to get a job. I worked through those 2 years of university in Alaska. And the first day of classes was like a week later or something like that. And so we had to get on things real quick. We got it all set up, got me set up in the dorms. I went there to study creative writing, kind of a random thing to go to Alaska for, but that's what I was interested in. And so that happened. I ended up in Fairbanks, Alaska, and spent the first year there. My roommate was Eric, who I've mentioned in a few videos a while ago. This one likes to do that. Look.
Oh,
whoa. I know.
I didn't do anything. What are you yelling at me for?
Yeah, she's just spazzing out.
Is that not right?
There was no excuse for that. Just a big old spaz fest. A really, really cool guy. And it's kind of like a whole convoluted story about how I actually ended up with him as my roommate, because I had another guy and then I had to change and then had to change again, blah, blah, blah. End up with Eric. We become good friends along with this guy, Joe, an Alaskan guy, but Eric was from California. And Eric and I have been friends ever since. He lives in Salem, Oregon. That is where I usually park my car that I have now. And so I spent the school year 1990 to 1991 in Fairbanks, Alaska. I got a job at the newspaper as a reporter, and then another job like at a movie theater on campus. And then Eric wanted to transfer down to Juneau, and so I decided to make the move with him. I spent the summer of 1991 working in Denali National Park, and then moved down to Juneau, spent the year there, spring of 1992. Then I had another job set up in Denali National Park. And so I took a ferry from Juneau in the southeast on the Panhandle to Haines, hitchhiked through Canada, and then ended up in Denali National Park. Now, I've told this story before, I won't get too lost in it, but that was the summer that Chris McCandless ended up living in the bus and dying out there. Summer of 92. He started hiking out there on, I think, April 29th. I left Juneau like May 7th or something like that, like a week after that, and then hitchhiked part of the same route, and then ended up working in the park there. And then I heard, while I was working there, people were talking about it, a guy that was found somewhere, by himself, alone, who had died. The details were very murky, but that was actually the second time that a guy died in that area. One of the workers for, I think, the same company that I worked for, I was a housekeeper there, cleaning rooms. A guy that I hadn't met who worked in a different area had went on a camping trip for the weekend, like on his weekend, alone, and he died of exposure, which I'm not exactly clear what that means, like dehydration. It was never exactly clear like what it was, but anyways, they realized he was missing and went out there and found him. So two sad stories there. But after the summer of 1992, then I decided to leave Alaska, went back to California. I moved back with my dad and stepmom and brother who lived in Petaluma at that point. I went to Santa Rosa Junior College for the spring of 1992. Now, I had made a friend, Matthew, in Alaska, who was from Eugene, Oregon. I went to visit him in the fall of 92 while I was going to university, or the community college, just to see him. And I really liked the town of Eugene. And so I decided to leave California after that semester was over and go up to Eugene, plan to stay there for a year and get my residency in order to have a cheaper tuition at the university there. Now I'm going to try to fly by the next 30 years here because this is getting too long and I've told other stories, and I actually want to go more in depth into lots of these stories at some point in other videos. But basically I moved to Eugene. I lived there for a year and a half for various reasons, partly just my rambling spirit and everything. Then I decided to leave Eugene, and making a very, very long story shorter, I then became a essentially homeless vagabond for the next 6 years. And so I won't get lost in all that. But mostly without a home, and then, working on farms, going to rainbow gatherings, living in Hawaii, in the rainforest, and working various odd jobs, finding a few jobs here and there, but nothing long term. Come around to 1999, I'd met a guy in Hawaii who had been to India, and he got me all excited about the idea of going to India. Also, the fact that he said that it was really, really cheap to travel there. And so I decided to make it happen. I managed to save up the money, not very much, and went to India in 1999 for 5 months into March of 2000. Came back from there, again, had no plans and $0. But my dad had said that he basically had set aside a little money to pay for tuition once again at college. And so I decided to go back to Humboldt State University in Arcata, north of here, and get my college degree. I instead studied world religions because they didn't have a creative writing program. Otherwise, I definitely would have done creative writing. And so I moved up to Arcata, spent 2 years there, graduated from university in 2002, and then moved to Portland. And so I spent the next 5 years living in Portland as a delivery driver, doing no international traveling, just camping trips and stuff like that. And then the travel bug came back, and I went to India in 2006 for 3 months, came back to Portland, started saving up money again, and then went on a big trip in 2007 to 2008 to Asia. And then I will just say from then on, basically since 2006, then I've spent many months every year traveling internationally, and that eventually led into getting a digital camera, starting to film my adventures, posting them on YouTube, and the rest, pretty much. So there you go, the story of how I got started traveling. And that was the short version. I definitely could have made it a whole lot longer, and maybe I will talk more about it in upcoming videos. In fact, I'm sure that I will. All right, time for me to get going. Take it easy.